Welcome to the Jubilee Road podcast with authors and bloggers Jami Amerine of Sacred Ground, Sticky Floors, and Rebecca Huff of That Organic Mom. Each week you'll be inspired and encouraged by real talk, real issues, and the grace journey in real life. Grab a cup of coffee or sit as comfortably as you can in the carpool line and listen in for delightful conversation that'll make you think, sort through hopes and hurts, and most importantly, realize you're not alone on this wild, wild ride. Buckle up. Here are Jami and Rebecca.
Hi guys, welcome to the Jubilee Road podcast. Today we have my favorite doctor in the whole wide world, Dr. Janetta Jamerson. I feel like she can tell us more about herself than I can, because when I'm with her, it's always me talking. So Dr. J, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, as Rebecca said, I'm Dr. Janetta Jamerson, and I completed my degree in clinical psychology in 2009 and have been in practice ever since. I do feel called to be a therapist and have for a long time. When I was a little kid, I thought that I wanted to be a physician, but what I realized is that I wanted to be someone who helped people understand what was going on inside of them the way that my pediatrician did for me, even though I was a little kid. And ever since then, I've just had a dream of contributing to the healing of the world.
And you do. I know you've definitely contributed to my healing, so that's good. And by the way, in case you are wondering, I call Dr. Jamerson Dr. J. So I've often said she is my personal Oprah.
Which I love. I want to be Oprah.
Yeah, you're better than Oprah to me. But anyway, so I opened up just the platform on our Hopelively group. And if you're listening and you haven't heard us talk about Hopelively before, there's always a link in the show notes if you want to join, but it's a group for women, sort of a Christian support group for women. So that link will be in there. But I opened up the floor and asked the ladies in Hopelively to give me some questions that they might like to ask if they were sitting on your couch. And so I'm just going to start at the top with the very first question that we had. And this person writes, I have a question, and I'm putting this out to all of you. She had shared it in the group. So, how does one give it up to God? How do you give God control? What does that look like in a practical sense or a spiritual sense? Do I just say, here you go, God, and stop my efforts? Am I supposed to feel peace in the mess that is still there? Whatever I'm doing seems it isn't working, or I'm not hearing and understanding it.
Well, first of all, I am aware that, and I can speak from my own experience in my Christian walk, that we are a lot of times really boxed into a very rigid way of approaching our faith. And it's not necessarily that letting go and letting God is a hard line. That once you do that, it's something that you don't feel or experience or hurt from anymore. So if we can kind of free ourselves from the rigidity, and I'm going to talk about it in like a more flexible sense. So essentially from a more scientific standpoint, or the science of psychology, it's really kind of a cognitive behavioral technique where you make a decision that you want to change the way you're thinking about something or experiencing something. And then you set some goals about what you want that to be, and then you start moving in the direction of those goals. So if you want to start thinking differently, the first thing you need to do is find a way to tell yourself the truth, find out what's accurate. And a lot of times we aren't clear on what's accurate because our thoughts match our feelings. If we're feeling really badly, then our thoughts are going to be bad. To match that, we like to be congruent. So the thought of letting go of something initially would make us think that it's not something we're allowed to experience anymore. So again, with that flexibility, letting go means I'm deciding to think differently about this. And so do that and then reinforce yourself with thoughts that are in line with that new way of thinking. So for instance, if you buy a brand new car, let's say, I always use the example of a Honda Accord because that was my very first car. You buy a Honda Accord, you see 1,000 Honda Accords on the road that you didn't notice before. So that's called a confirmation bias. We look for information that confirms what we believe. But in your case of making a change, it's what you want to believe. So to make your decision about how you want to think about something and then start noticing the Honda Accords on the road.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that all the Volkswagens disappear or all of the Toyotas disappear. They are still on the road, and so it's still something that you're going to wrestle with, and that's okay. So letting go and letting God really doesn't rigidly mean that it doesn't occur to you anymore, or it doesn't hurt anymore, or that you don't experience it anymore. It just means you're actively engaging, moving in a different direction.
Wow, that is so good. That's kind of like, how when you're pregnant, you notice all the other pregnant ladies.
Yes.
Wow.
It's the same thing.
I never had thought about it that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. Okay.
But the take home from there is break away from the rigidity. You're not doing it wrong if it still hurts.
Right. So just as a reminder to yourself.
Yeah. And I really want to see this differently. I want to be more accurate and truthful in the way I'm thinking about this.
And from another perspective, I guess more of a technique perspective, I remember one time you telling me to choose a time to dwell on that thing, or like if I was going to be upset about, worry time. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, I love worry time. It's one of my very favorite techniques because I've used it on myself a lot. I know you're not going to love this example because it's about eating poorly. The metaphor that I like to use is deciding to make a change in your diet and that you want to eat healthier. And so every day you drive past a Chick-fil-A, and y'all know as well as I do, even with your windows up, you can still smell it, and it smells so delicious. So you decide that you have to stay away from the drive-thrus because of this new way of eating, but every day you pass it and it smells so good, and you find yourself setting your intentions on Monday. I'm going to behave myself. I'm going to go with my plan. I prepared meals yesterday, and I'm going to take my lunch to work. So you do. Monday's a great day, and you say, I'm really doing well on this thing. And then Tuesday, you take your lunch. It's a good day. But on the way home, you pass the Chick-fil-A. And you had a stressful day. And it smells super good today, and you're craving it. And you have to contemplate whether or not you turn into the drive-thru. And a lot of times we will. Sometimes we won't. But then we have to wrestle with that tomorrow. So my suggestion with designating a time for worry is like having a cheat day on a diet. When you decide that I'm going to give this amount of time to my indulgences. Because clearly your body wants it. You want two things. You want to put really good things in your body, but you also want Chick-fil-A. Just accept that about yourself. Let that be okay. And you control how much Chick-fil-A goes into your body.
Oh, that's so good. So as you're driving by, you're saying, okay, Saturday is the day I chose.
Saturday's the day. I'm not doing it on Tuesday because I'm choosing to do it on Saturday. And then when Saturday comes, you got to follow through. And you got to go to the drive-thru or eat something else that feels like an indulgent that you deny yourself for the rest of the week. And the reason that's really important to follow through is that you're going to need to be able to trust yourself.
So powerful.
So if you don't do it on Saturday, what happens on Tuesday?
You're going to regret it.
I didn't do it on Saturday, so it's okay. And now Chick-fil-A has just controlled you.
Yes.
As opposed to you controlling it, your cravings and your indulgences. So it's the same thing with when you schedule your worry. Mm-hmm. That I have this thing that's nagging at me that for some reason my brain wants to indulge. Well, allow that to happen. Accept that about yourself, but you choose when you do that.
Right.
And I recommend not scheduling it before bedtime. Some people feel good about doing it first thing in the morning. I'm a little afraid it's going to color my day. Mm-hmm. I always suggest doing it right before exercise.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that way you can kind of pump it out. Some people want to do it with exercise, but I don't want exercise to, I don't want exercise to be associated with something negative for you because we need it to live. But really just thinking about ways to be able to put it back into the container. And that doesn't happen well when we're falling asleep. So if you want to think of like having a container, like one sweet old man wanted to use jars, mason jars. Can I use my mason jar? So he can screw the cap on and put his worries on the windowsills where he liked to keep his. I use the Rubbermaid containers because I can do that, the airtight. And just kind of tuck them away in their cubbies with the labels. And when it's worry time, I pull out what I want to worry about, open it up, and indulge it. And then when time's up, put it back into the container and put it away. Now what's going to happen is I'll walk past the wall of cubbies and realize that a couple of the containers fell out and the ingredients spilled out. So it's up to me to tuck them back into the container, seal the top, and put it back where it belongs. And that's what's happening when those thoughts enter your brain outside of your worry time. Put them back in the container and say, it's okay. I can attend to this later.
Wow. It's like, that's just so amazing. I mean, I had never thought about it like that. I think sometimes my worries in the jar are kind of like fermenting and they're pushing the lid off.
It feels that way. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
But you're
so
stronger
good.
than they are.
just put them back in there and put the lid back on.
And if you need to put some books on top of it, stack a dictionary.
Stack it on
We
there.
don't use dictionaries anymore.
Or phone books. That's good. So the time that I chose, ever since you told me about this technique, I just choose my shower time, because if I do start crying, the water's already there. It's just going to wash it off. I'm not going to mess up my makeup or anything.
That's right.
So just get it over with in the shower. And then, once you come out of the shower, you're fresh and clean, and it's like a fresh start. So now I'm done with that. Leave it back behind in the shower. So that technique has really helped me a lot.
And the worry time is useful in that it gives us some information about what we have power over and what we don't. So if I'm spending my time on worry time and I can impact something that I'm ruminating over, I can make a plan during that time. And anything that I can't be productive about goes back into the container. So that's a big piece of it. Control, use your power over what you can, and then really make an effort to contain what you can. And notice I said contain, and because that let go is just really hard. You may get to the point where you realize this doesn't pop up anymore. I don't get this container out anymore. And that would probably feel more akin to letting go. But sometimes it just kind of stays with us.
Yeah, your container starts getting dusty. That's a good day.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I'm adding that in.
Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to the next question. Okay. The next person asks, what are some examples of positive, healthy self-talk? This is a really big one. So I have a thing on my website about sending your inner mean girl to charm school. So I think these techniques that you're going to give us, because I know you're going to have some things about talking to yourself in a healthy way. So that can go along with my charm school. Take us to charm school, Dr. J.
Okay. Well, this is a lot in line with getting control of your thoughts. This is very similar to that. And it goes back to what's accurate, what's truthful. So again, look at the way you think about yourself, even if it's negative, get it down and look at it, and then look for evidence that it's true. And if it's not true, then these are the things that we need to work on changing. And there may be some things on your list that are true. If you're not a good roller skater, you're not. Acknowledge it, accept it. You're not going to try to convince yourself that you can jump off the building and fly, because you can't. That's not true. But there's probably a lot of things that you believe about yourself that are inaccurate, and those are the thoughts that have to change. So look for evidence. What's true? What's true? Am I a horrible mother? Well, let me look at some evidence of that. I feel bad today. Something went wrong today. But let me really look at the course of my life and how I've contributed to the life of my kids and how I've structured their lives and how I provide for them and care for them. What's their narrative likely to be? Probably that they felt loved, that someone read to them, that someone fed them, someone was kind to them. So it's probably not true that I'm a horrible mother. I feel bad today. And so that is the way you kind of examine that for truth. And then start telling yourself the things that you came up with to support the truth. I really provide for my kids. I really take good care of them. I feed them well. They know that they're loved. They hear kind language coming from me. And so that's the way you do it. But if you don't buy into it, then it's not going to work. So if you just start saying to yourself, I'm the best roller skater ever. I'm the best roller skater ever. One, if it doesn't even matter to you a whole lot, you're not going to buy into it, and you're not going to go try to become the best roller skater ever. Tell yourself the truth. I've got a lot to learn about roller skating. And it's not necessarily negative or cruel, but it's more accurate. It's the truth.
Wow. Yeah, that's good.
Just like the positive thoughts are not going to be over the top. I'm the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, maybe to somebody. But how important is that really?
Yes. And you can apply that to pretty much any kind of self-talk, whatever subject the person is struggling with, whether it's being a good wife or being good at their career. That's right. You can just analyze it with the facts. Yeah. And just discard all of the lies that your inner mean girl is whispering in your ear.
Tell yourself the truth. And if it's something that's persistent and it hurts, it's probably not true. Right. Because it's incongruent. So look at it and see. And there may be aspects of it that are true. Mm-hmm. And then just change them. I said that like it's just change it. But dude, that's something you would be diligent to work on to make a change in yourself. If it really violated your value system that you weren't a good roller skater, then, my goodness, go learn to roller skate. And give yourself some grace in the process.
Okay. I think that was a pretty good answer. Okay, next question. What or how can you make a hard decision when there doesn't seem to be a clear right way? So how do you go about doing that when you can't tell whether choice A or B is the best. Do you have any advice in that situation?
I do have some technique. I don't like to say advice. Techniques.
Okay.
Ways to approach.
Techniques.
Because the very first reason is why I don't like to give advice, because you are the expert. You know.
Oh, that's
you
true.
know somewhere. Because I come from a religious perspective, not necessarily my practice, but as a human, when I tell people to really try to get in touch with their gut, because that's going to tell them, for me, I think of it as the Holy Spirit in me. God put somebody in me to help guide me along the way. And so that's the gut / Holy Spirit if you're coming from a spiritual perspective. Mm-hmm. And so that's the very first thing is, what does your gut say? If you can really peel back the layers of fear and self-doubt and all of those things that get in the way of us connecting to our gut and figure out, what is it that my gut is telling me? If you can tap into that, that's a great way to make a decision. I've got some more fun techniques too that I like to use to think about it, but I'll save those for the end.
Oh, okay.
So, identify what your value system is. You know, what's important to me, and then prioritize the things that go along in that. And then match your decision against essentially your rubric for what's prioritized, what's important to me. For instance, when my husband and I were planning our wedding, we paid for it ourselves and we had limited funds. And once upon a time, I would dream about what my wedding was going to look like and how wonderful it was going to be. And I had some things in mind. For instance, I really wanted my invitations to be done from Hat Show Print in downtown Nashville. I grew up in Nashville, and they do all of the posters for the Ryman Auditorium, and it's just a really neat way of printing. I think there's only a few places in the world that even print this way. And so I thought, well, my wedding invitations will come from Hat Show Print. But when it really came to writing checks and swiping credit cards, then it looked a lot different. And I had to make a list of priorities. And so I had, my top priorities were, of course, for me, the people there. Mm-hmm. Music was a high priority for me. And once I got my list made, and my husband and I did this collaboratively so that we're pretty compatible in our taste. So that worked out pretty well. But I realized that my invitations were like item number 23.
Ah.
I didn't have the funds for item number 17, let alone 23. So when I made the decision to let that go, it didn't feel as much of a sacrifice because I realized I was actually meeting most of the needs that I had. But had you asked me in isolation, do you have to have those invitations? I would have said absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. But in context of my other priorities, it just wasn't as important. So that helps you feel more confident in your decisions.
So you kind of stepped back and looked at the big picture, the wedding as a whole, instead of just one aspect of it.
What really matters to me.
That's good.
So now for the more fun interventions.
Okay.
So create a hindsight situation for yourself, because we always say hindsight's 20/20. If I had known what I knew now, I would do this. So one of the things that I like to picture is myself being old in a rocking chair. For me, I'm drinking some sweet tea, got a lot of land, some daisies growing, and I'm looking out on my porch, and I might be talking to a grandkid or, some young person, and they're asking me about my life, and I want to be able to tell what story. That helps me make a decision today.
Oh, that's good.
How will I want to feel about it in the future? So creating hindsight.
Yeah.
Another option that's fun is to put yourself in a movie. Because we're always watching these movies and we're cheering for our heroine, or we're telling her how stupid she is for making the choice that she seems to be making. We're like, just do this. And we're just begging her to make some move. Well, put yourself in that position and you cheer on your heroine and then do what you're telling her to do.
Oh, that's good too. Mm-hmm. I like that.
That's a fun one.
And you had told me once to picture myself in 10 years.
Yeah.
And start working towards being the person that I picture myself in 10 years. And boy, that really changed my perspective on a lot of things. That really was helpful for me. Yeah. That's good. Okay, are you ready to move on to the next question? Okay. The next one is, how do we make lasting changes when our life is in chaos? And then she says, asking for a friend.
It's okay to admit you feel like your life's in chaos. Even for yourself, but let's just put your friend on blast if that's what we're doing instead.
Okay.
One, just acknowledge it's okay to feel how you're feeling. That's a really big thing. Acknowledge it. There is a lot of stress in my life. It's reasonable that I feel out of control right now. And so then I likely have a limited capacity to do what I need to do. If everything was going well, I would have more energy to move in certain ways, or I'd have the mindset to move more positively. So recognize that some of your capacity to do that is a bit diminished currently, and that this is temporary, hopefully. And give yourself just kind of permission to take the time to think about it and to feel what rises to the top, what's the most important thing to tackle, and what you'd like to be different, and then start closely approximating that. And start small. If I feel like I'm in chaos, maybe the first thing that you need to do is establish some structure in your life. And this is not advice, it's an example. / advice.
I love that example. That's my favorite example of all time, structure.
Yeah. You got to recognize some places where you have some power. So acknowledge where you can impact some change. And I would recommend, this is advice, actually starting where you can build up your strength in order to feel like you have some power against the situation that you're in.
Okay.
And be patient with yourself. I'm horrible at patience. See, that's me admitting something about myself. And I am aware of it enough to make some changes and have yet to do so. I'm choosing not to change the fact that I'm not very patient.
I don't wait well either. We just were talking about that recently, and I think it has to do with impatience and also how often we get what we want when we want it.
Right. Everything's at our fingertips.
It is. I told Jami, I said, a lot of people think of God as like, insert prayer and then Amazon Prime delivers the answer tomorrow. And we're living in that generation where we're just kind of like expecting that instant delivery. It doesn't always happen that way.
It's true. And if something's truly chaotic, it's not going to happen that quickly.
Yeah.
So you just kind of gradually take steps to gain a little bit more control into turning that chaos into some amount of manageable order. But recognizing that there's going to be some aspects that are just outside of our control. We can't determine what's going to happen to the weather, the delivery driver getting to us. Like, there's just so many factors that go into it. And we've got to accept that and be okay with the fact that we're not 100% in control.
Right. Other people's behavior.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. And since you were saying that not advice and then some things were advice, it made me think of the word that you don't really like very much. And people often ask me, well, why doesn't she like that word? And I'm like, well, it's kind of hard to explain. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
You know what word I'm talking about. I knew you would. Okay. So explain to us the word should.
The word should, it's a binding element. It's like wearing shackles. We decide that I should do something. And often we don't even know where that should comes from. It's usually imposed on us from our culture, from our parents, from some trauma that we've experienced, that we make this decision that I should do this way. And it's not really coming out of our volition or our value system or even our true desires for ourselves, which is why we use language like should rather than want to. And that's my technique to come out of the should, is to change the language to want to, and then see if it actually still is true. We'll go back to my favorite metaphor. I should eat healthy. Well, do you really want to? Do you? I really want to eat pizza and drink beer. Like, that's the truth. Like, that's what I want to do. I'm going to be really honest about that. But I recognize that if I ate pizza and drank beer every day, a lot of the other values that I have would be violated. And so I have to recognize that it's just true for part of me.
Right.
But not for all of me, because part of me wants to live a long life to be there for my daughter, to be able to support her into motherhood and even later womanhood. And so it's incongruent. Wow. And giving myself the permission to really explore my desire to eat pizza and drink beer every day, as opposed to just saying I shouldn't and then find myself indulging in it every Saturday night and just feeling guilty. Just telling myself, no, this is what I've allotted for myself. And it's still in line with me being able to reach my other goals for my life.
Right. So you want to eat pizza and drink beer, but you also want to be healthy. And maybe that want to is a little bit stronger than the want for pizza and beer.
That's right. And there's a way to do both.
Right.
I can eat pizza and drink beer twice a month and be fine. I can do it once a week and be fine.
Right.
So that's why it's really important to recognize that that the shoulds are likely imposed on us, that they're not necessarily coming out of our value system, that we don't necessarily believe that. It's not that I should be healthy, I want to be.
And some of those shoulds, maybe, do they come from, like, our childhood and how we were raised? I feel like I have a lot of shoulds around, like, cleaning house and stuff.
Absolutely.
Right, okay.
Absolutely. My mom would not let us go to bed if anything was on her kitchen counter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can appreciate that as an adult who has worked really hard to purchase a home and want to respect that home and treat it well. But my standards don't have to be what my mom's standards are. If cleaning off the kitchen counter every night means that I read 2 fewer books to my daughter, then honestly, I want to read the books to my daughter and have a stack of mail on the counter. But freeing myself from the should says I can make that decision.
Right.
If it's a should, then I'm rigid about it, and that's the decision that I make, and I don't really contemplate what my other desires are that may be at least somewhat incompatible with them at any given moment.
I've spent a lot of time evaluating my shoulds since we've been together. But then I found that there's another aspect to should, is that when other people put a should on you.
Oh, girl.
You should fill in the blank.
That's right. They are trying to control you.
Yes.
I'll be so frank about that. Now, it may be that they have a pure motivation, that they just love you and want you to feel better, but it really is about them feeling better still. I know that sounds harsh, and I frankly don't care. Stop shitting on yourself and stop shitting other people.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's just a way of recognizing it, though, is because I think that's where a lot of our bad feelings about what we're doing and who we are come from, is when other people should on us.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're allowing them to shackle us.
Okay.
And frankly, they probably don't want to shackle you. They don't realize that that's what they're doing because they've been shitting themselves all day before you showed up for lunch.
Right. It's not malicious.
It's not usually.
Okay.
Sometimes, and we need to recognize when that is. And I think one of the questions is about toxic friend. Sometimes that is the case. That people are trying to be controlling and they know what they're doing.
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
So the question was, how do you effectively and kindly remove toxic people from your life?
I like that addition of "and kindly" because that indicates that my value is to be kind. Again, balancing your values, because sometimes your values are not compatible and you have to prioritize what's more important. And kind by your standard may not look like kind by someone else's standard. So always try to behave in line with your values, but recognize that sometimes things require that we violate them a little bit. If you try doing the more soft Southern lady approach, which is where I always start, doesn't have the impact that you want it to have, you might have to shift a little bit, and you may sound a little more curt than you are comfortable with, but it may be what's necessary to get the job done, to set the clear boundary. And so I just want to challenge to be willing to violate what feels like a violation of your boundaries. Be willing to follow through with that if you need to, for your own safety. Recognize that a toxic friend is slowly killing you from the inside out. And oftentimes we really care about the person and we don't want to hurt them. And the kind of like we were talking about with the shoulds, when other people are trying to control us, often it's not malicious. They just want us to feel better, be okay, or join them in something. That sometimes we're doing the same thing to someone else when we're wanting to be kind to them by maybe even enabling their toxicity, but it's just not healthy and it's not working. But just to let them know that you want something different and that you're not on the same page, you're not on the same path, without putting them down. And that's a way that I would consider kind, is that it's honest, it's authentic, it's telling them the truth, but it's also not disparaging their way of being. It may be if they just said, well, you don't want to come kill puppies with me? And so it's like, no, that's disgusting. It's like, no, that's just not really something that interests me.
Right.
It's just different from what I want to do. What you want to do is different. And I just see us not lining up enough to continue spending as much time together.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. So suppose that you kindly tell this negative person in your life or this toxic person that, you just have different goals in life and, you need to kind of go your separate ways or whatever you say. What if this person presses you for more specifics? Well, what is it? How do we not line up? I mean, do you understand my thought there?
You don't have to give any more than you're willing to give to that person. You might decide it's kind to give feedback so that they can understand how they may be impacting other people. Mm-hmm. And that's really up to you to choose if you want to give specifics. But always recognize that you need to use I language. Well, I feel this when you do that. Because somebody else may feel very differently about it.
True.
I don't like this. This doesn't feel good to me. This isn't comfortable for me. This feels unsafe, if that's the case.
That's very helpful.
Yeah. Not, well, you're like this, and you say like this, and you're negative, and you're this. Because we don't know the path that they're really walking. Again, they're the experts on them.
And that makes them defensive also.
Of course it does.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it really doesn't warrant judgment. Maybe they're acting out of their trauma or their fears. We can understand that. We've done that before.
Wow.
But the point is to say, it's not working for me, or I don't feel equipped to handle that.
That's good. That was a very good answer. Thank you. I think a lot of us are going to be able to benefit from that one. Okay. Another question that we have is, okay, this is a hard one. How do we move on from grief, and what is too long to be grieving?
Okay, this is one of those things that people come into therapy and really don't like because they want a clear answer, and I can't give one. It's just not fair to determine how any one person is going to grieve. Now, we do have like the laid out stages of grief, and you can all Google that and contemplate it and look that up. And you probably can notice that you've fallen into that at some point. But nobody really gets to determine how long that takes or what that process looks like. I know that nobody can see my hands, but it's not linear. It's really more cyclical, where we can make it through some stages and we find ourselves kind of backsliding into a previous stage from time to time. For instance, let's say that we've lost a parent. My husband's dad passed away on Valentine's Day, so this came up for us recently. It's been 18 years this past Valentine's Day. And opening season baseball game, it's always sad for him. For the most part, he functions through life and he moves, and I'm sure he misses his dad more than he brings up to me, but I know that day's hard. I know when he watches the Masters, it's hard. Yeah. And I know that there's sometimes when there's the experiences that he has with our daughter that he thinks of his dad and wish that he could be there for. Or remembers having the same experience with his dad and it hurts. And he's allowed that. He's allowed to be able to go back to that place and shed a tear if he needs to. And I can't tell him that he's supposed to have moved on from that.
Right.
Yeah, so give yourself grace to do it your way. I would say if you're not functioning and you're tired of not functioning, then you may want to come up with some new ways of coping. But the fact that you're still grieving and that it hurts is likely going to carry throughout the lifetime. So the problem is really, is it affecting functioning? Is it keeping me from living parts of my life that I do want to be engaged with and not spend as much of the piece of my pie on grief?
Right. And what would be a red flag that, maybe you need to get some help?
If you're not participating.
Withdrawing from life.
Yeah, withdrawing from life, not functioning, not taking care of yourself, not engaging in life with loved ones the way you want to. If you're spending so much energy and time contemplating your losses that you barely notice what you are appreciative of in your gains, because that's going to kind of change throughout time. Closer to the trauma, yeah, you're going to be consumed with it. Give yourself some grace with that. But if you find that it gets to the point where it's intolerable, then that's a time where you want to make decisions to do something a little bit different, where you might want to even contain your grief. I'm going to let myself acknowledge the loss and experience the loss and think about the loss, the loved one, whatever it is that you lost, because it's not always death.
True.
It's actually the stuff that isn't death that's harder to grieve. And let yourself go there, and then decide to go ahead and put it in the container, knowing that it's in the container. You can go back to it when you need to, and nobody gets to tell you what that is. Everyone's very uncomfortable with other people's grief. Get it. It hurts to watch someone else you love hurt. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's what they need to do. And there's a value in going through grief. It teaches us a lot of things about what we need and desire in our lives. If I don't acknowledge what's missing, how do I know what to aim for?
True.
Yeah. Grief's okay.
So just walk through it and deal with it. And
that's you can see why people hate that answer. Yeah, they just come in here and they're like, you need to just tell me, I gotta just go through it. Yeah, you do.
Well, they're looking for something concrete. They're looking for, I think, when someone wants to know, when should I be through this process, they're looking for the light at the end of the tunnel.
Sure.
When am I going to be over this?
Sure. And you're not going to be over it.
Right.
You're going to get comfortable with your ability to be in it.
Yes.
You're going to gain confidence in that. And other people aren't going to experience that. They can put their expectations on you and decide that you're not meeting their expectations. You've grieved too long. I could say to my husband, oh my gosh, the 18th year in a row you're going to cry opening season game? It's like, no, that's one of the spaces that he allows himself to be there. He doesn't miss out on Eleanor's birthday or our anniversary or time at the beach for grief. Mm-hmm. But he has this time when he owns it and claims it, and I let him because it doesn't threaten me.
Right. It's good. And it's healthier for him to express his feelings than to try to deny it's there.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That he's loved well, and that it hurts when you lose it. And that better equips him to love me well and to love our daughter well because he stays engaged in it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that just shows what a great dad he had.
Isn't that so true?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. So true. Okay, and since you brought that up, and we were talking about the red flags, maybe getting some outside help, another person had asked, how do you pick a counselor that will manifest positive results?
Again, shift expectations what positive results look like. And I'm not just letting all therapists off the hook.
Okay.
But people come in looking for a finish line. All the time. 90% of the time, people show up looking for a finish line. And the process of therapy does not involve a finish line. It's like what I said about grief. It's getting confident in your ability to be in the process. And so if that's your goal, then there's a lot of people who can help you do that. Mm. Right? But if your goal is a finish line, then you're going to interview therapist after therapist after therapist, and no one's going to be able to do it for you. You just can't get there. As long as you're alive. Mm-hmm. Now, if the alternative, you're at a finish line.
Right. But then you don't need your counselor
But then
anymore.
No, I'm not going with you there.
No. I don't recommend it.
So first you shift your expectations of what productive therapy looks like. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, everyone isn't a fit. Everyone doesn't match up. You've been very kind to be supportive of me and tell me that you think that what I do is really great for you, but there's somebody that thinks I'm the worst person that they've ever sat with. It's just the truth. And it hurts, I have to admit. I'm sensitive about that, but I'm a sensitive person. And that it is hard when somebody doesn't think that I'm a good fit. But that's all it is that I can't be a good fit with everybody on the planet.
It's nothing personal if they don't.
It's nothing personal, which means it's nothing personal if you don't feel... it's kind of personal, but it's not offensive. Mm-hmm. If you don't feel like you fit with a therapist, if you don't feel safe, then you need to find somebody that you feel safe with. And that's really the big thing is, can I tell this person my truth? Can I be authentic sitting with this person? Research says that the relationship with the therapist is most of what leads to productivity. Wow. So that's a really big piece, is how you feel in the room with that person. Now, not to say that competency isn't important. You definitely find somebody that's licensed. I've had concerns raised to me where people have gotten involved with therapists, because anybody can call themselves a counselor, therapists who are not licensed. So look for that license, and that's for sure you want that would demonstrate at least some amount of competence. Mm-hmm. And then the rest is more about what it feels like for you, or do their techniques or their way of being match how you work. Now, I would advise, and this is advice, people to challenge themselves to see if they can kind of get with a program of a therapist. Mm-hmm. Give it a few tries to see if maybe a different approach might actually be more helpful than what you are used to or you think you desire at the time. And if it just still doesn't feel right, then find somebody else that does, that feels a little bit better. There are all kinds of ways to research a therapist. Word of mouth, I think, is really, really great. When people send me their friends, we do tend to be good matches, mm-hmm. because, they know their friends and they know me, and they can see if the match is going to work. Right. I have a profile on Psychology Today, and I find that people who find me on Psychology Today are generally good matches too, because they've got buy-in before they walk in. I've already kind of won them over without having to work.
That's where I found you.
Yeah, that's right. They decide there's something about me that feels safe or comfortable mm-hmm. to them, whether it's true or not. That's something they've decided, and that gives you buy-in. And so I would suggest looking at something like that, where you can read a little bit about somebody and say, does this feel like somebody I could vibe with?
Like you have a little bio on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Psychology Today, to be listed on there, you have to have certain credentials.
That's right.
And so it's a little more trustworthy than just Googling someone.
Yes.
Because you can end up with anything.
Right.
And not to suggest that, that counseling couldn't be helpful for someone else.
That's
but,
right. That's right.
If you're looking for a specific, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to say that, the differentiation between, just a counselor mm-hmm. and someone who's been to school and has certifications
right.
and
right. And some people who do have degrees and certifications are still designated counselor. Not everybody has to be a psychologist.
Right.
There's licensed clinical social workers, and there are professional counselors who do have the credential. But you may or may not have ever noticed, my license is there, and do not sit with anybody who doesn't have a license to slay. It's legal. That is a legal concern. Like, you cannot practice licensed psychology or counseling without the license. And so that is a big red flag. Now, I hate to say this, and I know that we're with a group of Christian women, but the church is really bad about endorsing people who, they're wise, they love Jesus, but they really don't know what they don't know. I mean, even when I was at the master's level, I'm good at this. Mm-hmm. I've got this down. But, whenever I graduated with my PhD, I thought, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for those people who saw me when I was at that level. And even now, years out, a decade out now, mm-hmm. I look back even when I had my PhD, when I just finished the PhD, and thought, I was pretty good, but I wasn't great yet.
Yeah.
So years experience, it does play a lot into it, but lack of training just cannot be made up for. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people who truly don't have the training, but they think, I'm a pretty good friend. I'm good at giving advice. Mm-hmm. That's another. They can hang up a shingle and call themselves a counselor, and then they're giving advice. And that's mm-hmm. another thing that I really, really speak against, the giving advice, even though I kind of admitted that I gave some advice today, mm-hmm. is that my job is really to help you figure out how you can be your best self. If I'm just giving you advice and you're dependent on me, it's a decent business model.
That's so good that
but
you
I
said
will not be well with my soul.
And see, I think a lot of people, and I want to talk about this too before we finish up, but that is so good you said that, because so many people ask me, well, what does Dr. J say you should do? And I'm like, there's so many things wrong with that question. I understand what you're asking me, but I don't go talk to Dr. J and then come out with all of these, a to-do list of advice of things that she's decided for me to do that's best. She helps me to see, have a different perspective. She helps me to figure out what I really want. She helps me see the truth about myself. And so it's kind of hard to explain, as I think, and this is something I'm actually working on a blog post about, and I think it goes back to the stigma of seeing a therapist.
Yeah.
You see that they make fun of it in movies. People who see a therapist, they're typically portrayed as a crazy person. Yeah. And I really hate that it's like that. And I get this so many times. I guess maybe because I don't really watch a lot of movies, or maybe I just don't pay attention to what other people think about what I'm doing with my life. Good. But when people say, oh, wow, it's just so brave of you to admit that you go to a therapist, or I appreciate you sharing that you see a therapist so frequently. And I'm like, oh, pat myself on the back. I didn't know I did something good. I'm just being honest.
Well, you're helpful in destigmatizing it.
That's kind of the direction I wanted to go with my my blog post I'm writing, is how do we remove this stigma? Why it's kind of like the body image issue, I mean, it's something that society has kind of almost created in a way. Right. But I mean, I find it very beneficial to come and have you help me work through these things. And I can't imagine, I mean, I don't like saying crazy people, but I mean, I'm not a crazy person, no. And people say, well, why do you go to therapy? And so I think that, people just don't understand, who goes to therapy?
People like you and me. My mom stayed with me whenever I first had Eleanor. And my therapist's office was walking distance from my house. Nice. And so I'd walk down to my therapist and I am a therapist. This is what I do for a living. Well, I'm so proud of my doctoral degree, but when I was getting ready to go to my therapist, I don't know why you do that. Literally got that question. But if you believe that the therapist tells you what to do, then I could see where that could be interpreted as weakness. It's, oh, you can't figure that out for yourself. Mm-hmm. But going to the therapist means you believe you can figure it out for yourself. Mm-hmm. And you want to learn more ways about how your brain works so that you can unlock some secrets inside of yourself and use those tools. So going to therapy means you are choosing to believe in yourself and what's possible for you.
That's so good. I know I've asked you that before so many times. Why do I do this? Why do I think like this? And then you just help me get in there and figure it out. And then I can change the way I think and change the way I behave in those situations. And I mean, it's just beyond beneficial. So that's really good.
Yeah. So that's why it's really important to understand how therapy works so that you recognize that it's an empowering thing.
It is.
You know, it helps you find what's inside of you that can work for you that you may not have accessed yet.
Right. I definitely feel like you've helped me be a better me. So,
and it was in you. It was
already
always
there.
in you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just helped you find it. It's almost like we're going through like the depths of your soul with a flashlight. And I'm like, I know this path because I learned all about it in school.
That is so cool.
I know where to turn
that.
next.
Yes. Oh, that's so good. I love that. Really good. Yeah, I know. And I think you really are. You were talking about being good or great. And I know it's a touchy situation with like church counselors and stuff. And
Yeah.
I can speak this is from my own personal experience. And I'm not projecting this onto other people. But from my personal experience, the difference between church counseling and counseling like I'm receiving with you, it's just so far apart on the spectrum that it's almost not even comparable.
Oh, wow.
You know, and a lot of that, I think we're a really good fit. You know, I always feel like I'm your favorite when I'm here. So, and you're definitely my favorite. So, I'm sure you make every single patient that comes in here feel. I sit in the waiting room, and when I'm waiting for my turn, and the person that was here before me comes out laughing and smiling, I'm like, that Dr. J. People are supposed to come out of counseling crying, not laughing, woman.
And sometimes they do, you know.
You do.
But I do feel like I need to give it. Sometimes churches really do employ licensed professionals.
Yes,
You know, that's why I say look for that license.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but there are sometimes people kind of elevate themselves and think, well, I'm pretty wise.
Right.
And I'm good at this. And it's easy to buy into. And so sometimes the church doesn't recognize, I guess, what kind of damage could be done whenever they're really just trying to support their congregation.
Right.
But I've done a lot of repair work.
Yeah.
A lot.
Wow.
And it is too
That's
bad.
a hard one.
Yeah, it is.
That's
It
a hard
is.
one. I mean, I don't want to step on anyone's toes, and I know you don't either.
Yeah.
But it is just really important to look for those certifications. And,
It really is.
you know, there are certain qualifications that put you where you are. And so
That's right.
it's important to look for those. Okay, I have another question. This one is, how do I convince my husband, we, need counseling? I like that question.
Oh, that's a really, really tough one. You know, we've talked a lot about shoulds and power and control today, and we have to recognize that we do have some limits over our influence in someone else's life. So we have to be really careful about the way we word that. And I don't mean being inauthentic. I mean only claiming what we legitimately can claim. I feel like we could use some help navigating these things. I don't always feel equipped to address some of the problems that we have in our marriage. Or I see you struggling, and I think a professional may be helpful in this. You know, which is a little bit different than you just need to see a counselor.
Oh,
Or you just that. And that's just really your opinion. You know, but you're saying this is nagging at me because this is how it's affecting me. That you can share authentically and recognize that they have the power and volition to choose for themselves. Modeling is a great way of doing that. You know, if you're willing to show that you're willing to care for yourself too. I mean, that was one of the things that really hit me once we had our daughter, is that I eat all kinds of stuff that I wouldn't feed my kid. And she literally sits and eats different meals than, you know, I knew after we went to bed and I was going to get my pizza and beer that I wouldn't feed her.
Right.
And then it was, I don't want to say all out hypocritical, but modeling for her is going to be way more impactful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so that's something that you can do for your spouse, is modeling wellness and modeling self-care and being willing to go yourself to learn to navigate certain things and then share openly about how it's impacted you. But also learn to accept when your impact on another person has reached its end. And then you may have some other decisions to make that could be hard.
Right. And then you may have to choose to have a certain attitude even if you don't get your way.
Yeah.
So possibly if your spouse isn't willing to go to counseling and you're committed to staying in the relationship, what are some ways to stay positive and, be happy in spite of those circumstances?
I want to shift your language a little bit.
Okay,
the expectation to be happy in it is not fair.
Okay.
You can say, I'm going to find joy in every day despite this circumstance. That came from Paul. I can't claim that.
Right.
But I'm going to choose to do that.
Okay.
It's not necessarily fair to be in a situation, for instance, if somebody is toxic or abusive, that it's not reasonable to think I'm going to be happy in this. But I am in control of how much I engage joy.
Okay.
And I'll make efforts to do that. If I find that the environment is impeding that too much, then I can shift and get out of this environment or be in a different one if my partner won't move with me into a healthier environment.
That's good. So it's okay to admit that this isn't a good situation and I'm not happy in this.
That's right.
Instead of trying to lie to yourself and say, okay, I'm going to be happy even though this is really painful.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you feel like there are ways you're contributing to the breakdown of the relationship, I mean, that's something you can talk to your therapist about, or you can, question your spouse. What ways do you see me contributing to this thing that we experience repeatedly? What are your ideas about how I could do this differently, or what would you like to be different? And then you might decide, I can sign on to that. I can make those changes. Or you might say, that's never going to be me. And you've got to accept that about yourself. But the expectation is that I'm going to smile and be a good wife is just unfair. It's shackling. That should. That's should. That's what that is.
Well, very obscure should that I had in my head there. I see it now.
Yeah.
That's why you do what you do.
That's right.
Okay, so we just have a couple more minutes before we need to wrap this up. So I was thinking what would be really helpful is if we can get sort of we talk about self-care a lot in Hopelively. And I think, seeing you once a week is probably my number one self-care act that I do.
You're pretty good at feeding your body really good things.
Well, yeah. I mean, but that now is second nature
Gotcha.
for me. Healthy eating, that's second nature. Even supplements, those things are, second nature. Exercise. But for me, a conscious decision to take care of myself is to come here, to pay my copay, to take that moment out of my week and just come and see you. That for me is my top self-care thing. But if for some reason, whatever reason, someone's not able to do that, so let's call it Dr. J's self-care toolbox. What would you put in that toolbox?
Well, the very first thing is what you say is second nature to you is to take care of your body. Your brain is a part of your body. It will not function well if it doesn't have the fuel that it needs. So that's the very, very first thing. Mm-hmm. And people don't love it. They come here and they're like, you're not my MD. Let's move on to the other things. Well, your brain's not going to do what I'm going to try to help you do until you take very good care of it. Mm-hmm. And so it's not disconnected from our body, and we've got to fuel our body with good things.
Oh, yeah.
Exercise is just so incredibly important. You got to remember that we weren't, whatever you believe about the creation, evolution, whatever, we weren't meant to sit inside of these spaces on cushy couches all day. Mm-hmm. To survive, we were supposed to be out and about. We were catching whatever we could, and we learned what fueled our bodies and what didn't. We were very much connected primitively to how to stay alive well. And now we're pretty disconnected from that. Mm-hmm. So we have to impose a lot on ourselves in order to be healthy. So that means we do have to more closely approximate those early days, and we need to see the sun. We need to move our bodies. We need to do the things that would have been required for us for survival before. That now we can literally sit in my bedroom all day and have everything I needed at my fingertips. Or wanted at my fingertips. Enough to stay alive.
Yeah.
I really could. I could have somebody bring me a pizza. I have entertainment. I got oxygen. I can call people. I've got social connection right in my hand.
You do.
All those things. But that is not how we were built to thrive in this world, to be healthy. So we've got to more connect to that. So that is really a big self-care thing. And you mentioned just like choosing to come to therapy. What you may or may not bring to consciousness, I can't say what goes on inside of your head, is that you say to yourself, I deserve this. I deserve to make space for this. I deserve to put my resources towards this. You're actually saying that I'm worth it. So that's when you put good things in your body, you're saying, I'm worth staying alive and being healthy. You're saying, when you exercise, you're saying, I'm worth taking this time to fuel me. And so that's a really important thing to acknowledge, is that you're doing a lot of the cognitive work, even at a subconscious level, when you choose healthy behaviors.
That's
okay.
Good.
So in that, notice I said choosing healthy behaviors, not eating good or behaving yourself. It's choosing to be healthy. It's choosing to thrive. So that the physiological stuff is just, it's so, so important. And honestly, the rest of it is kind of in vain if you don't. Having balance in the way that you think, being flexible over rigid. The rigidity, we've talked enough about that today. The shoulds, they bind us into not giving ourselves the freedom to explore. And a big part of that is being connected to our emotions. I was definitely brought up in a household to not emote. That was just the thing that we didn't do. And I can understand why my parents, being civil rights activists, I can understand why that was a way that they had to be.
Survival.
That was survival for them, but they helped create a world where I can be healthier and engage my emotions. And that's really important because it tells us a lot about what we need. And so whenever we just shut that down, or I shouldn't think that way, or I shouldn't feel that way, or other people tell us, well, don't feel that way. Don't cry. We hear that a lot. And that's somebody loving on us. I put their arm around you. Don't cry, baby. I need to cry. I need to engage this emotion because that tells me something about my drives. It tells me about what I need. So allowing yourself space to acknowledge that and to experience your emotions is a big part of self-care and being healthy.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. Well, that makes me feel good too, because I was in the car with my son and we just had left, the doctor's office, and it didn't go the way he wanted to. And I could just see him like trying to hold it back. And I was like, you know what? If you want to cry, go ahead. I think I would cry in this situation, and I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to drive home. So just cry if you want to. And he did. And by the time we got home, it was, it was just like it purified his soul or something, because then we moved on. And it is tempting to tell someone not to cry because it causes us pain.
That's right. And we're ultimately trying to heal ourselves or soothe ourselves rather, whenever we tell someone else to stop emoting. But it's one of the most unhealthy things that we could tell someone. And just good modeling for the people around us, particularly if we're mothers.
Right.
Eleanor wanted to take her hamper to school.
Take her what to school?
Her hamper.
Oh my.
And I found myself saying, you don't need that. And so my husband and I talked about that. I was like, I really, really want us to shift our language and stop telling Eleanor what she needs and doesn't need. We want to help her develop her sense of what she needs and doesn't need. She might think she needs her hamper at school. But my job is to teach her about how we function in the world that we're in. Uh-huh. And that's where I'm more of an expert than she is, just based on experience, not much of anything else. And so I tell Eleanor we take our backpack to school, not our hamper. Our backpack has the things that we need. It has our extra clothes in it. It has our books in it. It has our hat and gloves in it. And that's what I explained to her. That will be more useful to you at school than your hamper. Not you don't need that. And so shifting our language to the people around us helps us shift our inner dialogue too, to be more healthy.
Yeah. Wow. That's good. I hadn't thought about it. I mean, there's so many things that you don't realize about the way you speak.
That's right.
And I think that's just one more reason that it's so beneficial to see a therapist, because it does help us. And as many years as, we've been seeing each other, since I've been seeing you, you see me too, but since we've been here, I will catch myself saying something, and then I'll hear Dr. J's voice in my head reminding me that shouldn't be there. You see what I did there?
I do.
But anyways, it does help. And I mean, that I feel like is really good, because it's not just helping us. And this is another reason to practice self-care, because the fact that I come and you help me with these things that you help me with, it doesn't just improve my life, it improves my family's life as well. Yeah. And it's just a form of self-care, but that self-care helps me to take care of them.
That's right.
And I think that's one of the most important reasons a lot of us practice self-care, is so that we're capable of taking care of the people that are around us that we want to take care of.
Particularly if that's one of our priorities and our values.
Right.
But take care of yourself first. Like you're in the airplane, and they say, if the cabin pressure changes and the mask drops, put yours on first. Mm-hmm. That's really important. You can't help your child if you're passed out.
So true. Wow, Dr. J, I think you gave us a lot of really good tools to put in our, health box here. So, because I feel like mental health is just so important, and I think it's often overlooked when people are, looking at the big picture of, just being a healthy individual, that sometimes mental health gets overlooked or shoved aside. And I think it's really important to put some focus on that, and also to take away the stigma for people who actually do choose to see therapists.
That's right.
So I appreciate so much you answering our questions and being here for us.
I'm glad to do it. I'm honored.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for joining Jami and Rebecca for this episode of Jubilee Road Podcast. If you loved this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it on iTunes so more women like you can find freedom in the grace journey. And join the girls here next week for another episode.